When you think about stress, sex is probably not the first thing that comes to mind. At least I hope so. However, there are some interesting connections between stress and sex. Sex suffers due to stress. Sex can reduce stress, and sex can itself cause stress. And how all of that works, we will find out today. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today we'll talk about stress again, and today we'll explore the connection between stress and sex. First of all, sex suffers from stress. Why is that? Imagine a caveman encountering a lion. Viewers who have been here for a while probably have a déjà vu at this point. The caveman sees the lion, oh no, a lion, and there are some changes within his body when the so-called fight or flight response takes place. He has to fight the lion or run away from it, therefore his body switches to maximum performance. Nutrients are added to the bloodstream to sustain the muscles, blood pressure is increased, heart rate is increased, and all bodily functions that are not useful for fighting or running away are turned down, such as digestion and fornication. I mean, it wouldn't be helpful if you are running away, oh, I hope the lion doesn't catch me, and then you are like, oh, by the way, sex would be nice, oh, look, an erection. That wouldn't be helpful. Now, of course, this is very much simplified. A more detailed explanation of the whole process you will find in Robert Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And he also describes the various effects stress can have on fornication. For males, this includes sexual dysfunctions such as erectile dysfunction, not being able to get an erection, or premature ejaculation. For females, the menstrual cycle might change, and there are also some problems regarding pregnancy and birth. However, those are rather rare. And all of those effects are more severe effects of stress that can occur later if you are suffering from chronic stress for some time. The first effect that is likely to occur if stress is having adverse effects on your sexuality is a decrease of your libido, a decrease of your sex drive. Now, this might go unnoticed because the drive, the desire is reduced. It's not like you want sex, but you can't do it, but you don't have the desire in the first place. However, it is important to notice this because it can be an early warning of stress-related problems. Together with problems in regard to sleep and depressive moods and a sudden drop of performance, this decrease of your sex drive is an effect that can occur rather early if you are suffering from stress-related issues. Sex can also reduce stress. As you might know, sex has a whole range of positive effects on your health, and one of those is that it reduces stress. It's not very important what exactly you do. Sex with a partner has a bigger effect than masturbation, and sex with an orgasm has a bigger effect than sex without, but there is always a positive stress-reducing effect. Now, of course, this doesn't mean we should view sex as a means for stress reduction or that we should have sex just to reduce stress, but it means that a healthy sex life offers some protection against stress-related problems. There are, of course, several alternatives. So if you are less interested in sex, or if you are asexual, or if you are single and don't have a lot of options at the moment, this is not a problem. There are a lot of alternatives. For example, sports and exercise are very effective against stress. Hobbies are helpful. Social interactions are important. There are a lot of ways to reduce stress, but of course, sex is a nice one. However, sex can also cause stress. One issue that is frequently mentioned is pressure to perform, because nowadays there is a lot of sex in the media. Sex is discussed a lot and all aspects of sex are discussed, and due to the internet we have easy access to all kinds of information and also to pornography. So we are confronted with a lot of ideas of what sex should be like, and they might not match what our own sex is like. And we might end up thinking, oh, I don't look like that handsome guy from the shower gel advertisement, or oh, I don't look like that beautiful girl from the glossy magazine, and oh, I don't know the Kama Sutra by heart, I haven't had this super multiple orgasm yet, I haven't done my Kegel exercises today, and oh, it's best if I just leave it. And of course, this problem is even more severe if you are a person who tends to put a lot of pressure on yourself. If you experience everyday situations as a test and thing that you need to perform. We have discussed this issue in my video about Schulz von Thun's styles of communication, especially, of course, in regard to the self-demonstrating style. Another issue that might occur is that there are conflicts in your relationship because you and your partner have different opinions of what your sex should be like. Maybe one of you wants to have more sex or not as much or in a different way. Maybe one of you likes to experiment and the other doesn't. And so there are conflicts in the relationship that again lead to stress. All of those aspects combined can form a downward spiral, a vicious circle. It starts with a lot of stress in one area of your life. Maybe you have a lot of stress at work. This wouldn't be uncommon. And this causes your libido to decrease, your sex drive to go down, so you end up having less sex than usual. Now, usually your sex life is a source of relaxation and recreation for you, and it helps you calm down and calm down and cope with the pressures of everyday life. And now that you have less sex, your stress further increases, or it is not decreased as usual, so the problem gets worse. And on top of that, you get a conflict in your relationship because your partner might not like having not as much sex as usual, and your partner isn't sitting still watching rainbows all day, but has his own stress issues maybe. And so conflict arises which means additional stress. And when stress gets worse, you have even less sex, and the problem gets worse and worse. So how can we act against that? What can we do against these issues? First of all, it's good that you are now conscious of the problem, because issues in regard to sex aren't that well known in regard to problematic effects of stress. If you think of the adverse health effects of stress, the first thing that comes to mind is probably burnout, followed maybe by depression or digestion issues, but stress is probably pretty far down on that list. But as I mentioned before, if there are issues, you might not notice them, because if your sex drive decreases, it might go unnoticed, but it can be quite helpful to notice this as an early warning, a signal that tells you there is a stress issue and you have to do something so it doesn't get worse. A piece of advice frequently given by sexual therapists is to, together with your partner, make an appointment for time together. This doesn't necessarily need to be sex. You don't necessarily need to have sex during this time, but you set aside some time to spend with your partner. This often seems a bit strange at first, because making appointments, this is like work and bureaucracy and strict planning, all things we don't usually associate with sex. However, it can be quite useful to make sure that your time together and your sex life does not fall victim to, for example, a stressful work topics or things like that, and setting aside a certain time frame and making sure you stick to that, and you really have this time together at the appointed time. That helps to protect this relationship time and this activity against the stress of everyday life. You might recall Stephen Covey, who mentioned in his 7 Habits that activities that are important but not urgent need to be consciously and actively protected, so they don't get neglected because issues that are urgent and important take up all your attention and your time. And if there are already some relationship issues, conflicts in your relationship in regard to sex, this might also be helpful to take some pressure out of that. If there are discussions, do we have sex, when do we have sex, with the appointment, at least, if we do, it's at that time, and this might make things a bit easier for a moment. And also, you can prepare for this time and you can look forward to it. Maybe during your stressful work day, in the evening, I have this time together with my partner, and you have something to look forward to. And finally, in regard to stress, it is always a good idea to strictly separate your work life and your private life. So don't check your work mails in the evening, don't take work-related calls, but when you finish your work, really conclude your work day and switch into spare time. And one thing that can be helpful here is to consciously perform this transition by having a kind of transition ritual where you consciously say to yourself, by doing that, I conclude my work time, and I start my evening, my spare time. This could be, for example, your way home from work, or when you change from your work clothes to your spare time clothing, or maybe you could just sit down for a moment and have a cup of tea as a transition ritual. For further advice on dealing with stress, I recommend my series How to Deal with Stress. I will provide a link to the corresponding playlist in the video description. If you would like more exciting videos about soft skill topics, please subscribe to the channel. I would be glad to have you as a subscriber. I would also be happy to get a like from you if you enjoyed the video or if you left me a comment. We will see each other next week when we have the book review of Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.